Welcome to Divinity Original Sin 2, Larian Studios 2017 CRPG, but I am of course playing on the updated Definitive Edition. We have a lot to get into today. Let's jump right in. Up first, choose your difficulty. I highly recommend that the vast majority of players play on Classic or Explorer mode. Even if you're someone who likes a challenge, Classic is going to be quite difficult. Tactician and Honor mode, really difficult, and sometimes even require you to have some knowledge on ways to kind of cheese some of the mechanics a little bit. So highly recommend Classic or Explorer if you're a new player. Now the first choice you have to make in character creation is, do you want to play as an origin character, so a character that has a pre-established backstory? You do have some appearance customization over them, but not the entire character. Or do you want to play as a custom character? If you want to play as a custom character, just scroll on over here and then you'll see custom elf, human, etc. And this is where you choose your race for your custom character. Now keep in mind that each race has its own set of 2 special abilities here, and they also get 2 talents specific to that race. I'm just going to mention one here. If you play as an undead character, note that one of the talents is undead. You heal from poison, but you take damage from regular healing magic or regular potions. So undead is great, but if you don't want to complicate the healing process, you might want to stay away from undead. And below the 2 racial abilities and the talents that you get depending on your chosen race or origin character, we have something called build preset. Now, there's no classes in Original Sin 2, so to say. What build preset does is it starts you off in a direction that represents a class that you might want to play if you're playing another RPG, for example. So if you're a ranger player in almost all games, choosing ranger as the build preset right here is going to set a bunch of your stats in character creation to represent what a lot of rangers typically would want, but you can also customize it even more. So if we go past the appearance tab right here and go to preset, you'll see once again I have the ability to change the build preset. This is the same choice as before, and you'll notice that when I go from ranger to rogue, the attributes, the abilities, and the starting skills all switch up a little bit to better represent that build preset. Like I said, you could just roll with this, but I do recommend clicking on edit here to see where these points were spent and why, because on level 2, once you reach level 2 and beyond, it's completely up to you to start spending these points on your own. Like I said, there's no ranger pathway that you're going to follow. You're going to have to make this determination on your own where you go after level 1. So if we click on edit, you can see we have all the attributes here. Keeping things simple, strength increases your damage with melee weapons. It's also carrying capacity. Finesse for ranged weapons. Intelligence increases the damage with your spells, with most spells, intelligence-based spells in this game. Constitution is your HP. Memory is important for all builds because the more points that you put into memory, the more active skills you can have at a given time. So if you don't invest any points into memory, for example, and you're playing like a wizard type character, you'll only be able to have like 3 spells while you're in combat, while a wizard who puts more points into memory might have like 10, 15 spells at their disposal when they're in combat. But this is an attribute that I recommend investing into as you go versus just dumping into it early on, because as you level up, you'll start seeing, oh, I want to buy more skills, so I need more memory points, etc. So wits right here is for your critical chance, your initiative, and your ability to detect traps. For the ranger preset, you can see that finesse and wits were given to me, which is not a bad start for a ranger character. So clicking confirm, now I'm going to click edit under abilities here and see what Larian has set, and they have given me 1 point into huntsman and 1 point into pyro. And if I want to change this up, of course, all I have to do is hit the minus button, and then I can put, I can double up on huntsman, for example, if I want to. The most important thing to note about combat abilities, the ones that are above the weapons right here, is that these basically represent the bread and butter of your character's build. This is where you get the ability to use skills. It's kind of like classes in a way. So warfare is associated with fighter type skills, whirlwind, bashing hammers into the ground, stuff like that. Huntsman is associated with ranger like skills, arrow spray, first aid, etc. Scoundrel is your rogue like skills, special backstabs, shadow teleports. Pyro is your fire mage. Hydro is your ice and water mage, and this also includes some of the best healing spells in the game. Arrow is your lightning and air type mage. You get like teleport spell, chain lightning, etc. Geomancer is earth type magic, so summoning blobs of oil and, you know, fortifying your character, stuff like that. Necromancer is necromancy type spells, raising bloated corpses, using special blood attacks. And summoning actually has its own combat ability. In the first game, this didn't exist, but summoning in this game is actually really, really powerful. Very, very powerful. And this will give you access to different summons and special things that you can do with those summons. Now, to learn skills associated with a combat ability, you do have to buy skill books from a vendor, and I'll explain more on that later in the video. But interestingly enough, you only need 2 points into a combat ability to have access to, for example, if I have 2 points into Huntsman, I have access to all of the Ranger Huntsman-like skills for the first half of the game. Actually, it might even be like the first 60-70% of the game. So I don't need more than 2 to have the ability to learn those skills and use them. With that said, I might consider putting more than 2 because, as you can see, Huntsman also gives me an increase to damage when attacking from high ground, and the more points that I put into it, so it's at 5% right now with 1 point, at 2 points it's at 10%. There's these other passive benefits that come with investing more points into a skill. For example, summoning, the more points I put into summoning, the more powerful my summons actually become. They start with more health and deal more damage, etc. But I only need 2 points into summoning to have the ability to learn all of the summoning skills for the first half or first 60% of the game. For new players, keep it simple. If I'm going to play as a ranger type character, you know, 1 point into huntsman, and then maybe I put 1 point down here into ranged, as ranged is going to increase my damage and my crit chance with ranged weapons, and that's a great start for a ranger type character. The weapon abilities right here and the defense abilities do not associate with learning skills. These are just passive benefits. So if I wanted to play as a tanky type character, maybe I consider putting a point into warfare and then also a point into, you know, retribution or leadership. At the bare minimum, you want to put 1 point into one of the combat abilities here, so you at least have access and have the ability to learn skills. Otherwise, you won't have any skills at all, including at the start. At the bottom, you get to put a point into a civil ability of your choice. For the Ranger, Larian has it preset on Lucky Charm, but I can just click the minus. Really is up to you what you want to do here. A lot of these are more RP type focused, so no stress here. Keep in mind, you're also going to have a party of 4, most of you, unless you run the lone wolf talent, so you can have different party members, you know, excel in different areas. Telekinesis is great because you can grab objects from a distance and move them around. Lore Master allows you to identify items that you pick up so then you can use them and also see weaknesses and resistances of opponents. Sneaking is sneaking. Thievery is lock picking and also pickpocketing. Good to have at least somebody that's good at that so you can open up chests and all that good stuff. Bartering is going to make prices cheaper. When you speak to a vendor and sell things, make sure to speak with the character that has the highest bartering skill. Persuasion is going to give you some special unique dialogue and outcomes for situations if you're into that. And then Lucky Charm allows you to find better loot or lucky random things in the environment. Clicking confirm, and now going down to skills right here. If you're still on the preset, it'll show 3 skills that are already chosen for you, but the skills that show here are determined by what you actually put a point into for your combat abilities. So because I put a point into Huntsman, the game is going to let me start off with a choice of 3 skills out of a few of the Huntsman type skills in the game. So I can choose whatever 3 that I want. Just look through them, choose whatever you think you want. You can get the other one as soon as you encounter a vendor that sells the skill book for your missing skill. There's also going to be way more skills to choose from, so don't stress too much. But yeah, start off with your 3 skills and then go from there. And this brings us to the talent tab. So you only get talents you get 1 at level 1, 3, 8, 13, 18, 23 or something like that. You don't get talents too often, but they're extremely powerful. And Larian will have a preset one for your build preset that you chose earlier in character creation, but I highly recommend looking through all of these because you don't get to respec in this game until the very end of Act 1 or the start of Act 2, I guess you could say. And you're going to be stuck with this talent for all of Act 1. And like I said, they can be very, very powerful. For example, Comeback Kid will make it so your character will stay alive from a blow that would have otherwise killed that character. Morning Person I love, and it makes it so when you use a resurrection scroll on a dead companion, they will spawn back in with 100% HP, which is very advantageous. So many good ones here. There's some non-combat ones as well. Pet Pal, for example, allows you to speak with animals. Highly recommended to have somebody in your party that has a point into this, but do keep in mind that the companion, a fan, has this as his character. So if you run with a fan in your party, you don't actually have to pick it up with another character. But I should also just quickly talk about Lone Wolf, because a lot of people talk about it. So if you don't want to manage a full party of 4, Lone Wolf will buff up your character, but only let you have one other companion in your group. So you can't run with a party of 4, but your character gets really strong. Some people say Lone Wolf is actually easier than running with a party of 4. With that said, this is a party-based RPG. So if you want to experience the stories and the companions and the synergies between different builds, you don't want to run with Lone Wolf because you want to have that full party of 4, but it's up to you. So after you've made your talent choice, then you get to choose up to 2 tags, and this is going to offer special dialogue options. It's like your character's background in a way, your custom character's background. And then for instruments, the instrument that you choose is going to alter background music a little bit. So choose whatever you think you like the most. So jumping into the game itself, and we're going to stay on the topic of character progression right now to keep everything organized here. But this game features a shared party XP system. So for the most part, when you kill opponents in combat, when you complete quests or discover new areas on the map, for example, your entire party is going to gain XP, whether it's a companion that's with you, if they're not with you at the moment, or if a companion is dead. None of that matters. For the most part, all the XP is going to be shared. There are a few cases where you might notice a slight difference, and it's usually because of like a companion specific quest. But for the most part, everybody is going to share XP. And when you level up in this game, the first thing that you're going to notice is the level up arrow will show on your character's portraits over here on the left. But the minute that you go into your character menu and then exit out, that level up arrow is now gone. So the indicator that you would be looking for after that would be these green plus signs. So whenever you see green plus signs, that tells you that you have points to spend. So let's go ahead and level up. So I'm going to go into my character menu. And as you can see over here, we have a green plus sign over attributes, one over the combat abilities tabs, and one over the civil abilities tab. So every time you level up in this game, you are going to gain attribute points, and you're also going to gain combat ability points. Civil ability points, I believe, are only levels 2, 6, 10, 14, 18, and every 4 levels after that. So you're not going to be able to level up your civil abilities that often. And the same goes for the talents, which I talked about in character creation. As you can see here, I leveled up, but I don't have a talent point to spend because you only get them every so often. No reason for me to go over this, as we already went over this in character creation. It's basically the same exact thing. Just level up your points when you have them, because the power boost is important in this game. And on a related note, your character level is going to kind of indicate to you where you should go on the map. Of course, the first map's a little bit different because you're trying to escape Fort Joy and you only have access to this part right here, and you have nothing over here to the east. But generally speaking, in Original Sin 2, when you're wandering around the map, if you encounter opponents that are, 2, 3, 4 levels higher than you, that's usually an indicator that there's somewhere else that you could go on the map that's more level appropriate, and then you can come back to that other area later on. Let's talk about skills. So you've invested some points into a different combat abilities, and you're ready to actually pick up some more skills so you can actually feel like you're playing some sort of class or build. Well, in Original Sin 2, skills don't present themselves when you level up. You have to buy skill books and then learn those particular skills, and the skill books are sold at vendors. So for example, if I click on Nebra right here, on the left side of the dialog box, you can see a little icon that says trade. If you click on that, you can look in a vendor's inventory. And if they have books that are like this, vibrant colored books, it's probably going to be skill books. In this case, the purple ones are summoning, and you can see at the bottom of the description, it says summoning. So if you have a character that's a summoner, you're going to come to Nebra to buy some of these books, and you'll notice to buy these books, anybody can buy them, but to learn the books, you have to have a certain amount of points into summoning. For example, Dimensional Bolt right here says requires summoning 1. So if I have a character that has 1 point into summoning, I can buy the book, right click on it, and learn this skill. But this book right here, Rallian Cry, says it requires 2 summoning. So if I don't have 2 points into summoning, I can buy the book, but I certainly can't learn the skill. So let's go ahead and just buy Dimensional Bolt right now. And I'm going to take it, and then we're going to go into my inventory once we get out of here. And I'm going to make sure that I have the portrait selected for the character that has summoning. In this case, Beast currently has summoning 3, +1 from gear. The other 2 I invested in myself. And then we find the summoning book in the inventory. And I have it right down here in Beast's bag. It doesn't have to be in Beast's bag. You just have to have Beast selected in the portrait. And then I right click on that, learn skill. And there we go. I have learned Dimensional Bolt. And if we go into the skills menu, you can see that it shows up on the left side right here under available skills. And if my memory slots allow for it, if I have some open memory slots, that skill is going to auto slot and become an active skill that can then be on my hotbar. But let's say that I didn't have enough memory slots. That skill would just show up right here like this, and I wouldn't be able to actually select it. So if you have memory slots, make sure that you have skills that you've learned selected so they're actually active. Everything on the left right here is inactive. This is just the list of skills that you have. On the right, these are the skills that you'll have the ability to use while you're out and about. A really useful tip here, if you go to your map, you can place down custom markers, custom flags, and then label them. And I highly recommend doing this when you find a vendor that sells skill books that are part of one of your character's builds. So as you can see right here, my party is right here on the map, and then right above me is Nebra, the trader that I just talked to, and I labeled this as summoning skills. But then if you look all the way down here on the left, I put a blue marker, a blue flag that says Geo skills. So that's the Geomancer vendor. You can take a screenshot right here if you want to kind of have an idea where some of the traders are that sell different types of skill books, but definitely keep track because it's super confusing. After you level up, you come back to town and you can't find the vendor, you forgot. This makes it so much easier. Now when you get into Act 2, for example, or further into some maps, you might find more vendors, or you're gonna have to do new markers, etc. But stay on top of that. It will make the world of a difference for your character progression. Up next, companions, a very important part of this game. Unless you're doing lone wolf, not as important, but one of your first objectives on the first map outside of the tutorial ship is going to be to fill up your party, so you have a party of 4. Now there are 6 companions that can be found on the first map, and they can all be found in this first area right here. So you arrive on the beach right about right here, and then you kind of work your way south and then into the Fort Joy area, and you can't really get to the eastern side of the map for a little while. All the companions can be found here. If you would like to find the companions on your own, just don't take note of this map that I'm showing right now, but if you would like some assistance, as this is the biggest power boost that you're going to get early on in the game, take note of where my blue flags are on the map right here. Once you discover this waypoint in the Fort Joy Square, you should be able to line up your map with mine. And as you can see, the companions can be found all over, all 6 of them, but Sabile does have 2 possible locations that she could be. Now, if you filled out your party of 4, but then you find another companion, for example, this is Losa right here, and you think you want to have Losa in your group for a little bit to try her out, you have to dismiss one of your companions, and you can do this just simply by talking to them. So if I talk to the Red Prince, I can say I'd like to go separate ways. Yes, you are dismissed. When you dismiss a companion in the first half of Act 1, before you have escaped Fort Joy, before you've made it over to this eastern section of the map, the companions typically go back to the location where you originally found them. Sometimes it seems like it might be a little bit different, but they'll be on that part of the map for sure. Now, after you have escaped Fort Joy and you've discovered the Seeker's hideout, which is down here on the southern part of the map where this yellow flag is that says hideout and it has a waypoint. Once you've come into this part of the map, when you start dismissing companions to change them out, they'll start hanging out at the Seeker's hideout. They'll no longer be back over in this area. So important to note that because that can be quite confusing. So now I can get Losa into my group and we can see if she wants to join. Now she's in my group and I don't have the Red Prince. In Act 1, you have the ability to swap out these companions as long as you can keep finding them, and you can do all of their quests. It's not until the start of Act 2, in between Act 1 and Act 2, to where you have to make a final decision as to what companions that you actually want to take with you for the rest of the game. But in Act 1, you can keep swapping them in and out. It just gets a little annoying trying to figure out where they're actually at on the map. And when you recruit companions, you can actually spec them any way that you want. And when you get to the start of Act 2 or the end of Act 1, you do have the ability to respec them, just like you can respec your own character. But when you first hire them, they're going to ask you what type of, build you want them to be. You can choose whatever you want for your party. It doesn't matter really at all for the most part. So you can make, you know, Losa, you would traditionally think of as like a caster, but no, you can make Losa a frontline tank. It doesn't matter. Make them whatever you want. If you want to go like the classic class, the more cannon type class, the one that they tell you that they're best at, or they say something along those lines when you first talk to them and hire them into your group, is the one that more so represents their cannon type build. Since I've mentioned respecking a few times now, when you complete Act 1, you've escaped Fort Joy and you complete the rest of the map, you're going to end up on this ship called the Lady Vengeance. And if you go 2 levels down on the ship, I'm just going to kind of jump over there with my other character, you're going to find this mirror. You click on this mirror, you can respec everything, including your appearance, but you can just subtract points out of your attributes, put it into other attributes. Your combat abilities, you can completely spec out of certain combat abilities. Maybe you were a necromancer and you don't want to do necromancy anymore, just subtract the points till they're gone. And if you still see some points, that's because you have gear that is giving you extra bonuses in those. But when you subtract points and you respec, you don't actually lose the skills that you've already learned. You just might not be able to select them as active skills if you don't have the required, you know, amount of points into a particular combat ability. But it's super easy. You can do it with talents and your instrument as well, and you can do this with your companions. So just anytime you want, it's free, doesn't cost anything, very easy. Just come back to the Lady Vengeance, which becomes a waypoint, so you can just teleport back here, respec, and try something new. All right, let's talk about waypoints now. So as you wander across maps and different acts, you're going to come across these statues, and many times large statues that you find are actually waypoints, and if you click on them, you discover them, and you can actually just travel anywhere that you want on the map to other waypoints that you've discovered. So if I just click on, let's say, the Hollow Marshes, the bridge, it's going to teleport my entire party over to this statue that I discovered. Now, a lot of players don't realize it, but if you hit escape on mouse and keyboard, or I believe it's start on controller, we have waypoints. You don't actually have to click on a statue to travel to another one. All you have to do is hit escape, waypoints, and then click on the waypoint that you want to travel to, and voila. Now, the waypoints on your map are represented by this little hurricane looking icon. And like I said, just make sure to explore the best that you can, which is recommended in this game for many different reasons, and you'll come across these statues that are waypoints all over, and you're going to be using these quite a lot. Let's go back to some real basics here, because it's important to understand this. Your characters will all move as a party when they're all chained together. So their portraits on the left side right there are all connected. It means they're all chained together. I'm going to start off with controller, because controller users don't get enough love on my channel. If you hold down the left trigger, this lets you select a different character. And if I just let go on top of Red Prince, he ends up being the first person to run in the party here. If I do it with a fan, he's the one leading the party. But if I want to, for example, I want to send Ifan ahead to go scout an area, because maybe he's the one that's good at navigating traps. If I hold down left trigger, go over his portrait, and then press Y on an Xbox controller, as you can see, it dechains him, it detaches him from the rest of the portraits, and now if I control him, nobody else follows him. This can also be super useful for setting up for a combat encounter. For example, maybe I want Ifan to be further back, and then I want the Red Prince, for example, to be right up here to the right. It lets you do all sorts of things, so make sure you know how to do that. Let's talk about mouse and keyboard now. So on mouse and keyboard, it's really as simple as just taking your pointer and then grabbing a portrait and pulling it away and then letting go. So that deselected Ifan from the party, and then let's do it with Red Prince. Then you can take them two and chain them together while the other two are chained together and send them all different directions. It's really as simple as that. One quick thing that most players seem to miss, including myself, it took me a long time to realize this, but if you go into the menu, hit escape on mouse and keyboard or start on controller, there's something called formation right here that lets you actually set up how far you want to distance some of your companions from each other when you're running around, which is nice, because if you run into a combat encounter and everybody's just all grouped up, all your squishies and everything, that can be bad. But let's take my tank, Losa, put her in the front, and then my two casters way in the back, and then, you know, follow up with another DPS, and hit close. Now when I move around, you'll notice if I lead with Losa, she is way further ahead of everybody else, and they kind of form up like that. It can be really, really useful when you get caught off guard in random encounters that you stumble across. Okay, let's talk about one of the most important topics and confusing topics in this game, but it's not that complicated, but as a first-time player, you can just wonder, why is nothing working? And that is the topic of the armor system. So in Original Sin 2, opponents that you face, including your own party members will also have armor, are going to have physical armor bar, a magical armor bar, both, or one or the other. So for example, Griff right here, if I scroll over him, you can see he has 62 physical armor, that's the gray bar, and 50 magic armor. Well, Hilda here has no physical armor, but 12 magical armor. So first we need to talk about how do you deal damage to an opponent's hit points. Well, depending on the type of attack that you're doing, if you attack with just a regular weapon attack, that's going to be physical damage. Some spells are physical type spells, while other spells deal magical damage. You can see in their descriptions. If you want to actually get to those hit points, you have to first get through the armor that represents the damage that you're trying to deal. So if I just did a regular arrow shot with a fan, a non-magical arrow, and I shot it at Griff, it's going to first start ripping away at that gray bar, that physical armor, and once that physical armor is depleted, I'll start dealing damage to his hit points. Now, taking a look at Hilda, if I were to attack her with the same regular arrow attack from Ifan, she doesn't have that physical armor, so watch what happens to her HP. Depletes it. Now, if I were to shoot a special elemental arrow at Hilda, and do note that the elements are magic in this game, they're magic damage, it wouldn't go right to that HP. I'd first have to take down that blue bar, it would start chipping away at that 12. And then spells in this game, many of them are magic damage, but not all of them. Some do deal physical damage, so make sure to look in the spells description. A lot of necromancy spells are physical based, and also poly spells. But if we take a look at my inventory here, I do have an electric discharge scroll, which deals 10 to 11 air damage, which is magical damage. And if I were to shoot this at this character, you can see 12 is their magical shield. You're going to notice now they have 1 out of 12 for the magical shield, but still have their full hit points. So when speaking strictly on just dealing damage and killing opponents, dealing hit points damage, you got to look at those armor bars and determine what type of damage that you want to deal. For example, looking at this guy, he only has 19 physical, but 56 magical. So I can get to his hit points a lot quicker by doing physical type attacks. And I probably don't want to do both types of attacks to this opponent because it's going to take longer. So for example, if I use Feign to start chipping away at his magic armor, and then if Anne's turn comes up and I'm dealing physical damage, it's just taking longer to actually get to that HP bar. Now, we've talked about dealing damage, but how about crowd control type effects, which can come in the form of physical or magical? For example, this skill that I have right here, this warfare skill called Battle Stomp, it does deal some damage, but it also sets the knocked down status for 1 turn. This knockdown status, as it says, is resisted by physical armor. Now, because this attack does deal some damage too, it's possible that I could still knock down a character, even if they had a few points of physical armor. But generally speaking, you want to make sure that you're using a control type skill on an opponent that is depleted of that particular armor type. So this character right here has no physical armor right now. They do have 56 magical armor, but it doesn't matter because Battle Stomp is only resisted by physical. So if I use it, the character is knocked down. The same thing applies for any magical skills or spells that you have. So in the description of electrical discharge right here, it sets the shocked status for 2 turns, but the shock is resisted by magic armor as it implies in the description. Now this skill does still deal 9 to 10 air damage. So if you do try to use this on an opponent that has like 2 or 3 magical shield, you're going to get through that and still be able to do the shock. But if I use this on Hilda right here, she has 12. So the only thing that this is going to do is deal damage to the magical bar, and it's not actually going to set that shocked status. See, shock blocked by magic armor. So take a look at all the opponents that you face. This is the one stat that you cannot ignore. Look at their armor, see what they have, what they don't have, what they have the least of, and decide what types of attacks that you want to do on that character to control them and deal damage to their hit points. Now, this is also important to take into account defense-wise. So your characters, of course, have their own armor. You can see Beast has 20 physical, currently 0 magical because it was depleted. So I may consider actually using an attack or having another companion boost up some of Beast's armor so the opponents don't chip away at his health or take control of him. And Beast actually has an attack called Shields Up right here, which restores physical and magical armor. So if I use this, you'll notice that his magical armor actually goes up. It kind of replenishes that a little bit. The physical is already at full. Now, the gear that you wear, including rings and also a shield, if you decide to use a shield, are going to determine your character's armor levels. For example, this helm right here is 3 physical and 3 magical. So just keep track of what you're wearing on your character as you find new gear. Lacking in one area, consider maybe changing it up or something. So now you finished a combat encounter and your characters are all beaten and they have low HP. Well, in this game, it's super easy to heal outside of combat. All you have to do is have one item called the bedroll. You'll find these everywhere. I like to just place it on my main hotbar for my main character. And as long as everybody's in the vicinity, you'll notice that just by clicking on it, everybody is back to full HP and you get a temporary buff. If you want to optimize the start of a combat encounter, you can rest right before you go into it, so then you get that attribute buff if you care about that. I don't really do it myself. It's kind of tedious. But also, if a character has died, all you need is a resurrection scroll to get them back in the fight or after combat to get them back up. So just gather resurrection scrolls. You can craft them. You can also, of course, buy them at vendors. And I like to place res scrolls on my hotbar. As you can see down here, I have 6 left. You just click on the res scroll, then you click on the body of the dead character, and then you get to place that character kind of far away from where they are if you want, which can be really useful in combat because you can place them on high ground or something like that. And then that character will be back in the action or back just, running around with your group. If you have the morning person talent like I like to use, you'll notice that Losa was resurrected with full HP. Really good in combat situations because otherwise you res a character and then they take just a little bit of damage and they end up dying again. This is a good time to talk about party composition. Now, if you're playing on Explorer or even Classic, don't stress out too much. I want you to have fun, go into builds that you want, experiment. That's part of the fun with this game. But if you want the easiest time in this game for a beginner, focus mostly on physical damage. So building characters into physical type builds. For example, Red Prince right here is my 2-handed damage dealer. He's mostly in warfare as well as poly, because poly skills are mostly physical or resisted by physical damage. I have Ifan. He's my ranged ranger type character with huntsman skills, which are mostly physical. Losa is my 2-handed or my sword and board tank, but I also have Losa as a summoner in my group as well. And summoning supports physical type damage a lot. And Fane is actually a caster in my group. He's also multi-classed into being a little bit of a ranger too, but he does necro spells. Necro is actually a type of magic that's mostly physical or resisted by physical. So all 4 of my characters are capable of dealing decent physical damage, so I can really focus in on just taking the physical shields down of my opponents super quick, and you never really have to focus on, oh man, should I attack this character with magic and this one with physical? I don't really think about that. I just attack because all my characters deal physical damage. Now you could do the opposite of me and have a mostly magical damage dealing party, which would work similarly, although people do argue that a physical party is easier in this particular game. But you can also do mixed as well. Please don't stress out. If you want to do mixed and you want to have your fire sorcerer, and then you also want to have Ifan be a physical damage dealing ranger, go for it. Just keep track and see how it's working for you. And sometimes you might need to just multi-spec into a few other combat abilities. For example, maybe Ifan is mainly physical, but you also go a little bit into pyro, so you do have backup fire spells if you need to deal magic in a particular situation. One thing I am going to recommend for the vast majority of players, though, regardless of what your party comp is to have one character that's at least partially spec'd into Hydro here, as Hydro is where you're going to find some of the most consistently able to be used healing spells and most powerful healing spells in the game. So even if you don't use any of the ice or water spells, going into Hydro, a couple points to get the spells and then maybe even more to make the heals more powerful is not a bad idea. So let's talk about how combat works in this game. So you can be in dialogue and a combat encounter will erupt. You could walk up to a creature and combat will automatically start. Or if you know you're coming up to a combat encounter, you can kind of sneak around and have a character attack first before the enemy sees you, and then maybe hide some of your other characters in the back. So when the combat encounter starts, you can then sneak them up. For example, I'm going to come over. Oh, so the combat encounter started because I was caught sneaking. But since I have Beast all the way back here, he can kind of sneak up behind the opponents. So now I snuck all the way up to the alligator. I'm going to do an attack, and there we go. I dealt some damage to the crocodile. It's a nice strategy to use to get kind of a head start in a combat encounter to get some free attacks in before that character is thrown into the order of turns. The combat has now begun, and by the way, this crocodile fight in Act 1, I don't recommend doing it until you have your full party of 4 and maybe you're at their level, which is level 3. You can always come back and do it later. One of these crocodiles does have some special gloves on them that give you a really good teleport ability. And these gloves, many players will use for the entirety of the game despite their weak actual armor stats, but the teleport ability is super useful. On the bottom of my screen, underneath your turn, you can see 3 green spheres, which means that the Red Prince right now has 3 action points to spend out of 6 total that he can have, but you don't start with full action points. And I also used 1 by accident. I am going to regenerate 4 more next round, so it is possible to have 6 at the start of your turn, just not at the very start of combat. You start with 4. Moving in this game does cost action points, so this is different from Baldur's Gate 3. If I wanted to move right here, you can see it says 1 AP, so it would cost me 1 AP to move up just a little bit. Even if I move right here, 1 AP. But I can still go a little bit further to max out that 1 AP without it actually costing me. Attacking in this game, regular weapon attacks cost 2 action points. So if I did have a bow right now, I could shoot this alligator, or crocodile, excuse me, with a regular bow attack, and it would cost me 2, and then the Red Prince's turn would be over. If the Red Prince was down here close enough, I could do a sword swing, and that would cost 2 AP. Now, the different skills that you have, the skills that you get from combat abilities, from buying those skill books, all require their own amount of action points. So Battle Stomp, for example, you can see the 2 green spheres in the top right of the skill description. That means that if I were to use Battle Stomp, it would cost me 2 action points. If I were to use Dragon's Blaze, it only costs me 1 action point. And if I wanted to use All In, I would have to have 3 action points available. Now, taking a health potion also uses up 1 action point. So if I were to drink this right now, you can see 1 action point went away. Using resurrection scrolls costs 3 action points, and I do recommend having as many resurrection scrolls on you as you possibly can because you're going to need them a lot. Works really good with the morning person talent. And then throwing potions, or throwing, not potions, you can't throw potions like you do in Baldur's Gate 3, but throwing grenades costs 2 action points. Now it's the crocodile's turn, and they have their own action points that they have to go through, figure out what they're going to do. And now it's Beast's turn. So Beast is up right here. I have 4 action points total. What do I want to do here? Well, the crocodile's down to 5 out of 13 physical armor, so I think I want to keep chipping away at that. So if I just do a regular attack, it's going to cost 2 AP. Now he's down to 0, which means I can actually use other attacks that might have control effects, such as Battle Stomp right here. So that's the knockdown status, resisted by physical armor, but the crocodile no longer has physical armor. So this is going to cost me 2 action points, and I have 2 left. So this might not be a bad idea to kind of take this crocodile out of the next round of combat. So you have to play a bit of a game here. How many points should I spend on movement? Do I need to move at all? Is it worth spending all my action points to get high ground? For example, it's Ifan's turn. Maybe it's not a bad idea to try to come up here so I can have that high ground damage increase from investing into Huntsman. This crocodile's just out of reach, so maybe I consider just spending 1 or 2 to get a little bit closer, and then I still have 2 left to take a shot. But let's say that I end up using 3 AP to move up right here. I'm left with 1 action point. So there is a benefit for not using an action point because it's going to be added on to your next turn's action points, and then you'll have 5 to start that. But also sometimes you do want to use that last action point, maybe if you have like a certain buff spell or if you need a potion. For example, I have something called Encourage here, which buffs a bunch of allies in the area. I have 1 action point left, so maybe I consider using it. And you can see all 3 that were in that radius are encouraged now. How you decide to strategically handle a combat encounter, it's really up to you. There's so many different ways you can play this game. You can just do it more the traditional way and just, have everybody on the ground, attack the enemy front on. You can set up characters on high ground, different areas, hard to reach areas. It's all about having fun in this game and just trying things in a way that you want to try them. One thing that I do recommend, though, is having some characters that do have these skills that can control some of the enemy combatants, such as Battle Stomp, which I talked about, but there's a ton of magical spells where you can freeze opponents and all that. You just have to make sure you get through that physical or magical shield and then use those control type spells. They can be super useful in making a combat encounter a little bit easier when you can turn a crocodile into a chicken for a couple rounds and then focus on the other crocodiles. Also, don't forget that you can examine your opponents and see what they are resistant to. Having one character that has some points into Lore Master makes this much better. As you can see, the crocodiles have 20% fire and 20% poison resistance. Then you can see the other stats that they have. Very useful to examine, especially if you feel like you're not dealing damage. Try to figure out why. Now, some combat encounters in this game are just going to be really difficult, regardless of what level you are. But don't forget, Larian makes games where you can manipulate the environment and be really, really creative. So if you look right here in Fort Joy, the Griff boss fight is one of the hardest fights early on in the game, but you can make it so much easier by doing some funny, weird stuff, such as stacking boxes in front of characters. So because I know I'm going to get into a combat encounter here, you can see I grabbed a bunch of barrels and blocked Waltz off here. So if Waltz wants to actually reach my party, because I'm going to plan on fighting up here, Waltz has to either spend time destroying the barrels or will just stay back there and not do anything. And then of course I have a barrier for Griff and also Hilda, and this just makes it much easier to control a combat arena. And you can see I set up a bunch of barrels right here as well, so that way when Needle comes into the fight, he's not going to come up the stairs and then try to attack my party, because I plan on starting the encounter from high ground, which is also recommended. It's going to force Needle to spend time destroying the boxes, or he's going to have to come all the way across the arena and then come at me from the low ground. So you can do some really creative, fun stuff in this game with the environment to make fights so much easier. So now let's talk about Source. I wanted to give Source its own section because you don't always have access to Source. This is something you get a little bit later on as you progress the main story in Act 1. And I actually took you guys to a load point where I'm like 3/4 through Act 2. But you'll notice that under my character's portraits right here at the bottom of the portraits, there are 3 aqua blue looking diamonds, and this represents source points. So all 4 of my characters currently have 3 source points that they can use. Now, certain skills in this game, some of which you'll have right at the start of the game, but you can't use them because you don't have access to source yet. Some skills in this game require source. For example, if Fan has Summon Soul Wolf, something that he gets just because he's a fan, it's part of his backstory, but you can also buy source skills from vendors as well. And this skill requires 1 source point as well as 3 action points if I were to use it in combat. So if I summon the Soul Wolf, you'll notice that one of the blue diamonds right here has gone away, and it won't replenish unless I walk across a source puddle or if I find a source fountain to get some more source from. So right here is a source fountain in Act 2. If I click on it, it's going to give me some source, and I just walk over it. Now I'm back to 3 out of 3. Now there's this warfare skill that you can buy from vendors later on in the game called Onslaught. If I were to use this in combat, it costs 4 action points, but also 2 source points. So let me go ahead and just use it right now. Oh, it doesn't even let me. Oh, we'll use it on Losa. It's almost like an ultimate ability, but as you can see, it drained 2 source points, and now I only have 1. So in any given combat encounter, you only can use as much source as you have before you have to leave and then go find more source. But if you know where source fountains are, you can always return to them, so you have it ready for pretty much every combat encounter. But let's talk about questing. So the quest journal can be a little confusing in this game. It's less confusing than original Sin, the first game, but it's still kind of confusing. But if you open up your quest log in Act 1, after the tutorial ship, Escape from Reaper's Eye, these are all of your quests, your main quests that you pick up, along with your side quests. Now, some of you guys will have a category above this that says the 4 relics of Rivellon. Just note that that is DLC content. Larian puts it on top when you discover it for some reason, which makes it confusing because you think of it as like the main quest. 4 relics of Rivellon is all DLC optional content. But below your main and side quests here, the main ones are going to be at the top of this category right here. You have your companion specific quests, you have your personal character story, and at the bottom, chronicles are just keeping track of the major events that occur, so you can look at these to catch up on, you know, what's going on in the overall story. And whenever you actually complete an objective or do something that updates the story, etc., when you come back into your quest log, you'll notice the Red Prince has a green icon next to his name, which means that I did something with his quests and it got an update. So before that green was showing, I only had the Find a Kin Dreamer part of this quest, but then when I completed that objective, the Find Bahara update occurred, and I can see in my quest log that there was an update because the Red Prince was showing green. And then, of course, after you click on it, the green goes away. But that's nice to know what you did, and then you go into your quest log, you can easily find the quest that you just completed something for. But now let's talk about the map in relation to questing. So you're going to see red flags and yellow flags on your map. Yellow flags are usually important quest locations, not solutions to quest, just important questing locations. And red flags are usually specific markers that represent characters that are associated with a quest. Now, for the most part, you're not getting answers to quests by looking at the map. You still have to figure out most of these quests on your own. You're more so just getting location reminders as to where characters are that are associated with that quest. So for example, the imprisoned elf right here is a quest that I currently set as inactive, but I'm going to set it as active. And then if we take a look at the map, you can now see that there are 2 red flags representing a character named Griff and a character named Amiro, both very important characters for this quest, but it's not telling me that I can solve the quest by just going to Griff. Griff might have me doing something else to try to continue on with the quest. It's just showing me where these characters are in relation to this quest. Some of the flags won't even go away after you've completed an objective, so keep that in mind. These are like points of interest type flags. And lastly, in regards to questing, do keep in mind that there is a dialogue tab right here, and you can scroll back and you can actually review previous dialogue that you had with other characters if you forget what they said, or there's something important that you have to reference again. Now, one of your first objectives in this game, and this is really good to do, especially if you're feeling overwhelmed and you don't really know what to do, just loot things in the environment and save up gold, sell to the traders, and just really start saving up so you can buy skill books and potions and all that good stuff. Now, don't forget that I already explained this with combat. You can be really creative with the environment. Outside of combat, you can be really creative as well. For example, in this area of Fort Joy, this wooden ladder is down right now, but initially the ladder is up and you can't actually use it. But if you have a character that has the teleporter gloves, for example, or the teleporter spell, I can simply just take the red prince and I can actually teleport him up there. And now I'm in a new area of the map and I can kick this ladder down so the rest of my party can get up. There's a lot of things that you can do like that in the environment. But since we're up here now, I can come into this room, be careful not to walk into a room with guards or anything, and I can just start looting all sorts of random things. And one of the best things that you can loot in Act 1 to get gold really quickly is loot all of the portraits that you find on the walls. All you got to do is walk up to them and click on it with one of your companions. Probably your higher strength character is better because they do weigh a little bit. And then you're going to go to the vendor and sell all those portraits. Make sure to click on your character that has the highest bartering skill to be the one that actually sells things. So you got to put the portraits in that character's particular inventory box, and you'll get gold really fast and be able to buy skills and all that good stuff. But now let's talk about crafting. So this actually ties nicely into loot everything, because one of the ways that you're going to find crafting recipes is by finding crafting books. So for example, I hand placed this book, but just as an example, if I click on this vase right here, you can see there is a book inside it, the Firestorm Grenade, which is a crafting book. If I read this with the red prince, if I haven't learned this recipe yet, when I exit out of the book, a new crafting recipe will have been added, and you'll have like a little pop-up. And then if I go into my crafting menu here and click on the recipes tab, if we go to grenades, you can see I have the Firestorm Grenade recipe. You're going to find recipes for all sorts of things, weapons, potions, making potions is really important. Armor, you can make armor, food, objects, and even grimoire, which are scrolls for skills in the game. Now at the bottom, you can also see the ingredients that you need. Another important reason to loot the environment is because you're going to pick up mushrooms and empty potion bottles, and then all you have to do is just click combine if you actually have the required ingredients. And now I just made a minor healing potion. Now you can also craft on your own without having recipes by clicking on combine right here, and you can actually experiment, or you can look up the recipes online and combine the right ingredients to make things. For example, because I have 2 minor healing potions right here, if I put one right here and then combine it with another one, this is going to create a medium healing potion, and I just learned the recipe on my own right there. It now gave me the recipe just because I already knew this from prior knowledge on crafting. One really cool thing that you can combine are your character's boots with nails. And what this does, so if you just drag your character's boots under the combine tab, and then you find nails that you have in your inventory, you can find nails pretty much everywhere. If I drag the nails up here and then click combine, the boots that my character is wearing are now immune to slipping. So you can do this for all the boots that you pick up for all the characters in your party. And then if there's an ice surface, you won't actually slip. It's really clever to do this. Keep up with it. I should also mention, as a lot of players don't realize you can do this, you can actually combine skill books. So skill books are what you buy to then learn the skills for your character. If you have skill books in your inventory that you're not using or that you previously bought and haven't used yet, if you go to the combine menu, if you don't know the recipe, it's okay because you can still experiment here. But let's go ahead and just drag this fire spontaneous combustion skill book right here, and then I'm going to combine it with the polymorph skill Medusa's head. We're going to see I get a unique skill here called bleed fire, which requires 1 pyro and 1 poly, and it kind of mixes both of those together. You can make some really interesting skills that you would otherwise never really come across by messing around with that. Now, not all items can be crafted simply just by combining a few things together. Some items actually do require that you use some sort of crafting station. For example, if we go into recipes here, I have the recipe for a handmade sword, and it says that I need metal scraps and then any hammer plus an anvil right here in order to make a handmade sword, while the knife on a stick, for example, it doesn't require any crafting equipment. I just need the ingredients. But if we go up to the anvil right here and I click on it, then I go to recipes, I can just make the handmade sword right now. If I didn't have the recipe and I just looked it up online, or I wanted to try something, I have the anvil ready and I can just simply go into my ingredients here and then grab the metal scraps and then any hammer that I have, such as a repair hammer, click combine, and now I have an elven sword, a weapon that I can actually use. And it's similar for the cooking station right here. Certain recipes require you to actually have a cooking pot on you or visit a cooking station, and then cooked food is generally going to be more powerful than cold foods. I can make cold mashed potatoes, but I can also make boiled potatoes right here. You're going to find other crafting stations throughout the environment, things that you don't really know what to do with them, but if you find the recipe, you might have an idea, or you can just watch, a dedicated crafting video that goes into all the little details. But hopefully this is nice to at least give you an idea as to what's possible and to get you started. But we can't talk about crafting without mentioning runes. So under your crafting interface here, there's a tab for runes right next to combine. And runes are items that you can place onto gear to give them extra buffs. And in your inventory, you can find them under the magical sorting category, and they look like this. So right here is a small rock rune that gives an increase to earth damage, earth resistance, and also raises a character's maximum vitality. You'll find these runes as loot in the environment. You can buy them from vendors. You can also craft some of them. But when you have equipment that has rune slots, it will show up right here under the rune tab. So all this equipment right here is equipment that I have on my characters or just in my general inventory that runes can be placed in. For example, this amulet right here, it says empty slot. If I drag it right up here and place it into the empty box, another box appeared, which is rune slot 1. And if I click on that box, it'll show me all of the runes, or you can also put a source orb onto gear as well that can be equipped on that particular amulet. So right here is that small thunder rune, and all I have to do is just drag it, place it right there, and now this amulet has the small thunder rune on it. Do not click extract. So extract right here is to get the rune off. So if I wanted to replace this rune with a different rune on the same amulet, I would just click extract and it takes that rune off. And then I can put something else onto the amulet. Now on to everyone's favorite topic, inventory management. And your inventory is going to get pretty crazy in this game at times, but have no fear. You can click on different categories on the top here, so you can see only the equipment that you have right here. You can see only your consumables, so your potions or your food. You can see all of your magical items, your skill books, your magical arrows, and your scrolls. You can see all of your ingredients for crafting, miscellaneous. You have books and keys, and also a category for wares. So touching quickly on wares, if you pick up something and you think that you don't want it or you're going to sell it, you can just right click on it, add to wares, and then when you get to a vendor, you can just mass sell all of your items that are marked for wares, and you can see them all just by clicking on that as well. But on top of that, separating into different categories, you can also sort by last picked up, value, weight, durability, and type. Last picked up is super useful. So if you pick up a bunch of loot in the environment, for example, I'm going to pick up this apple, but let's say I picked up like 10 things and I don't know what I just picked up. If I go into my inventory and I go last picked up and I look down in the Red Prince's bag right here, you can see the apple is right there on the bottom. So I know that is the item that I just picked up. Very, very useful. And then sort by weight is also really useful because you can see right here, each character has their own encumbrance depending on your strength score. So when a character becomes encumbered, they start to move super slow or not be able to move at all. So you can just sort by weight to see what is really holding that character down. And let's say here, this is quite heavy. So I can just send it to a different character and then it frees up some of my encumbrance on that particular character. Also note that after you have unlocked the Lady Vengeance at the end of Act 1, start of Act 2, you can also right-click on items and send to the Lady Vengeance because there's a storage chest on that ship. And last thing with the inventory, if you want to be super organized, well, we do have backpacks that you're going to pick up or pouches, and you can drag things into these backpacks and do your own organization. So I can take the fire arrow, drop it right there. Any other arrows that I have, just put them all into that backpack right there. And then if you click on the backpack, oh, see, I was already using this for crafting ingredients, but if you click on the backpack, you can see those items that I put in there are right there. Just don't forget that you have backpacks filled with stuff. Quick section on teleporter pyramids. If you played Original Sin 1, you're probably wondering, where are they? Well, you don't actually get access to them until you complete Act 1 and you end up on the Lady Vengeance, which is basically the start of Act 2. If you go down on the Lady Vengeance to the second floor, the same floor that you can find the Respec mirror, over here is a character named Tarquin. You have to figure out how to get in here, but once you figure out how to get in here, on the table next to Tarquin is the red teleporter pyramid. It's very easy to miss. If you pick this up and then use it, it'll teleport you to the blue one, which can also be found on this ship, but be careful. There is a combat encounter involved with that one. Believe it or not, there's actually 2 more teleporter pyramids that you can find, both of which can be found on the Act 2 map. One is in Riker's basement, and the other one is on Blood Moon Isle, I believe. So you can have 4 total, but let's talk about how they work. So you can place teleporter pyramids on the ground. As you can see, I just dropped the blue one, and now I'm going to grab the red one and place it over here. And you can walk up to the teleporter pyramid and then click on it and say use, and it will transport you to the color teleporter pyramid that you want to go to, and it moved me over here. But you don't actually have to place them down. You can also just have them on your inventory. So Thane has one on him right now, and Losa is going to go pick up this blue one. And if Losa, you know, if I have her somewhere else on the map, maybe she's scouting ahead or something like that, and I want to bring her back, if I go into her inventory, all I got to do is just right click on it, use, and it will teleport her to the rest of my party. So you don't have to place them on the ground. These can be super useful though for navigating traps. This is where placing them on the ground can be really good. If you just take a teleporter pyramid and, you know, throw it over a trap with telekinesis, and then you can just teleport over to it, kind of skipping that trap area. Sometimes you might consider placing one outside of a combat encounter, so then you have the ability to teleport out of that combat encounter and go back to it. But keep in mind, it costs a ton of action points to use the teleporter pyramid in combat. One of my favorite uses for the teleporter pyramid in this game, and shout out to Proxygate for giving me the tip here, is once you have, I waited until I had my third one, placing one of them, you know, near a source fountain, so you can keep refilling up that source. So for example, if I was running out of source points or I was low, right now I can just take my, let's go ahead and right click on the teleporter pyramid with my entire party chained together here, meaning they're all going to teleport together. Just click use, and I'm going to go to the yellow teleporter pyramid, which I have placed in the town of Driftwood in the basement of Master Siva's house, where there is a source fountain. So I can just come back here super easily, refilling my source after any combat encounter. Actually, it just takes 2 seconds to fill up on source again. And last thing I want to talk about is the gift bag, because I think a lot of people are missing this, and it's okay to miss it because you don't need this. This is all optional stuff, but if you hit escape or start on controller, underneath load, you'll find gift bag features. And these are basically one-click installation mods for the most part. Enabling any of these will disable your achievements, and if you're like me, when you play through a game, at least on the first time, you like to play the game in its vanilla form. But there's a lot of cool, interesting things in here, some of which will improve your power, make you a little bit more powerful. You can increase the action point maximum from 6 to 8 right here. There's one that adds a vendor into the game that's going to have all these new interesting items. There's quality of life things where it helps you organize your bags a little bit better, although some people think that the improved organization actually isn't that great with the gift bag. There's an option, for example, to restore your source points whenever you hit the bedroll and you rest versus having to go to source fountains. So take a look at all these, scroll through, and if you want to enable one of them, go for it. Just remember, your Steam achievements or your achievements on console are going to be disabled in doing so. If you made it to the end of this video, thank you so much for watching all the way through. I really appreciate that. Much more overall Divinity content to come, especially now that Larian has announced their upcoming game titled Divinity. Catch you all in the next one.